Hello, this is Dr. Joel B. Goodin, host of Driven to Doctorate. Today we have one of my favorite students. They're all favorites, but some are more favorite than others. And this is Monica Shaw, or Dr. Monica Shaw. Sorry about that.
How
Dr.
dare you?
Dr. Monica Shaw. She's one of my students that's finished. And she's coming on the show to have a conversation and talk about the dissertation that she wrote and the process. Monica, how are you?
I'm doing well. How are you?
I am doing okay. I think I'm good. It's been raining here, and I'm trying to um, get over the lethargy of
Mm-hmm.
all the gloomy weather. You experienced some of that. You're in Oregon,
I am.
Oregon. I don't know how you like to pronounce it.
Oregon. We're out of our rainy season now, though, so lots of sunshine.
Oh, okay. Good, good, good. And so you're in Oregon. What are you doing?
I am working as a private practice mental health therapist.
Okay, cool. Um, right. And you said you've been doing a whole lot of Zooming or Google Meets or,
Right now, about 90% online. I have a few clients that come in face to face, but mostly.
right. About everybody that is doing therapy actively is telling me during COVID, it's just been nonstop. A lot of
Mhm.
people wanting to talk to somebody.
Our group has expanded greatly in the last 6 months or so. I
Wow.
think we've added like 10 new therapists.
Okay. Okay. That's good for job stability.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so I'm trying to think of whether I should ask. What are they? I guess slight caveat. You don't have to tell me, but or you can be like, I don't want to talk about that. But what do you say? Could you name like some topics? What are they like struggling with the most? These clients.
Yeah, a lot of times it's exacerbation of depressive and anxiety symptoms.
Mm.
A lot of people who had it well managed and under control before, it's flared up pretty badly with everything going on with COVID.
Right.
So I work with a mix of adults and teens, and so a lot of my teens, it's the lack of social interaction has been really difficult.
Yeah, loneliness, isolation.
Mm-hmm.
Those will make, I think, given a period of time, those will make most people depressed, uh, especially if you have a vulnerability for it.
Right.
Um, okay, I appreciate that. Um, so let's go back to your roots and blame them. That's a joke. So where are you from? Where did you grow up?
Uh, from Illinois, but didn't always grow up there. So I was born in Illinois. My parents are both from there. And when I was 6 weeks old, we moved to Texas, and I lived in Texas for about 7 years,
Mhm.
and then back to Illinois um, because my extended family was there.
Mhm.
And we, my parents had just had my little brother and moved us all back. Um, and we were there until right after my junior year in high school when my dad's company moved him um, to Georgia.
Mhm.
So we all went to Georgia, finished high school there, which was torturous. Like, I love Georgia, don't get me wrong. It's beautiful, wonderful. But a new school as a senior in high school was pretty awful. Um, and then I decided to stay there for college, went to Atlanta Christian College for my undergrad. And then, right as I applied for grad school, my family decided to move back to Illinois. And so I stayed and went to grad school.
At ACC?
No, I went to what was then called Psychological Studies Institute,
Okay.
but now has since been renamed to Richmond University,
Heard of that.
which confuses lots of people because they think that that's in Virginia, but it's not.
I think that's Richmond they're thinking of.
Right. I know. But my work posted on the website that I went to school in Virginia, so had to clarify that. But no, went there and finished my master's in professional counseling with an emphasis in children and adolescents, and had the fun experience of working at a psychiatric hospital in downtown Atlanta, which was pretty interesting.
Cool.
You can imagine.
Yeah.
And then when I finished, I went back to Illinois. So worked in Illinois until about a year and a half ago when we moved out to Oregon.
Okay. And we'll come back to that, circle back to your move to Oregon, because it happened during your doctoral studies.
It did.
And that's sort of what we're going to cover. Actually, I think that's next on my list of things to talk. My show map. So yeah, and I talked about this word. I called it chaos. I didn't know if that was fair, but call it whatever. I'll let other people decide what they want to call it. But you had a lot happen between the time that you enrolled at North Central University in the doctoral program, and then the time, when did you finish? Was it a few months ago now?
A few months ago, yeah.
So a lot happened. Apparently, a lot of it happened before I became your dissertation chair, and I didn't even realize all this had happened. Some of it happened while we were working together. But tell us about it.
Yeah. And I think chaos is a fair word, but I think maybe transition would be a fair word too. There was a lot of transition during that time.
Right.
When I first enrolled in North Central, I was fairly newly married, no kids. I was working as a school counselor, and I ended up, throughout my time at North Central, I went through a pretty extensive fertility process, which, if anybody's been through that, is pretty draining in and of itself. And through the process of IVF, ended up pregnant with triplets, which was quite the surprise. And then thankfully, I'm a little type A and I work ahead, because I finished a class right before I got admitted in the hospital to have the triplets. I finished it. I had gotten ahead and finished about 2 weeks early, which was a good thing because I had them 9 weeks early. So certainly wasn't anticipated that I was going to be in the hospital right then, but it was a good thing that I was a little bit ahead of the game, because I ended up with what was called HELP syndrome, which is a version of preeclampsia that affects your other organ systems. So I had fluid on my lungs, my kidneys were shutting down, and my liver was failing. I was in pretty bad shape, and I don't remember most of it, to be honest. And thankfully, that recovered fairly quickly from that after they removed the kids by C-section. But I guess it's one of those, that's all they can do to help you, and you either recover or you don't. So thankfully that went smoothly. And then spent the next couple months visiting them in the NICU every day, which was about 45 minutes from home. So juggling, thankfully I was out for summer break at the time, thankfully, but juggling, keeping up with classes and going to the NICU every day. And then when I brought them home from the NICU, I found out pretty immediately that I was pregnant again, which was a little scary after all of that. And had a completely healthy and normal pregnancy and delivery with zero complication, which was really awesome. But then, of course, was at home with 4 babies and trying to do classes and work. And at the time, actually working a full-time and 2 part-time jobs. And then ended up going through a pretty difficult divorce at the time. And after that, lived just me and the kids for several months, trying to work 3 jobs and go to school and take care of 4 babies, which was kind of crazy. At which point, my parents, who had been, coming over to babysit or mow the yard or whatever to help me out, suggested that we purchase a house together and then be there to be a support. So, as much as that did not line up with where I thought I would be in my life, it was like, yes, that's the best call for everyone. So we moved in together in Illinois for a while, and then they had been planning to come to Oregon for retirement because my only brother is here in Oregon. He's an orthopedic surgeon in Oregon, and so we just all came together out here and bought a big house together. And my dad is my childcare, and it's awesome.
Awesome.
And yeah.
So you have some help.
Yeah.
This is all during COVID. Some of that was.
We moved here and had about a month to explore before COVID shut everything down. So, yeah.
So 4 kids, a divorce, moving from Illinois to Oregon.
Yeah, with 4 kids, which is
With
was
4
a feat in and of itself.
Yeah. And then all while finishing doctoral courses and then beginning the dissertation.
Mm-hmm.
And some of that, I remember, I think you moved.
I moved during the dissertation, yeah.
Dissertation, and then you experienced dissertation during COVID.
Mm-hmm. And switched from working as a school counselor to doing private practice, which was a little bit of a
job
transition.
I guess I wanted, I had heard bits and pieces of your story, and I thought, and as I told you before the interview, I don't want to shame anybody that can't figure out how to make their life work with going to school. But I think there's also hope. If you can make it all work, you can do it. And I think that's what your story shows is with a little help from, it sounds like your family helped, and I don't want to shame anybody. That I know, I'm thinking of somebody specific that had to at least take some time off. I don't know if she'll be able to come back, but she had no help, and that was a big issue, I think. But I think your story says that even with extreme, call it chaos or call it whatever, obstacles, you can still do it. I guess I have some questions about that. Was it good for you? Was it detrimental to your health to make all of that happen while hearing all the chaos? Did you, because I sometimes look back at my dissertation and what I put my body through without having any kids at that point and without having any of the stuff that you talked about. I did have a divorce during my time, but other than that, you had a more complex situation. Do you regret it at all? Do you think maybe I should have taken some time off? And
well, there's a lot of answers to that question. So I don't regret it. Part of it for me was wanting to show them what was possible and wanting to accomplish this for them, but also I knew that if I waited and they were older, it would be even harder,
Right.
because thankfully I've been really blessed with good sleepers, and early bedtimes make it possible to do work. Not that that's what I wanted to be doing at, 7, 8 at night when I put them to bed finally for the day. But that's what made it, a, you know, even a possibility. Um, but I will say there was plenty of times I didn't, I don't think I ever felt this way during the classes, but during the dissertation, there was plenty of times that I was like, I would really like to just not do this anymore. um,
Right.
but I also kept telling myself, like, I've come too far not to finish. Like, at this point, I've invested too much into it. And so certainly there were times when the motivation was pretty gone, other than it would be silly to give up now.
Right. Besides that sort of, well, you can even expound on that if you want. What kept you, so I call that students on the ledge. The That's probably a bad metaphor, but that's really what we say is come back from the ledge, because it's almost this, I hate to say it's an academic suicide. It's the end of
Mhm.
a dissertation that a lot of people, including myself, considered during the process. I definitely thought about quitting. There's a number of reasons that everybody thinks about quitting, and I think they're all different. Some are the same. Just exhaustion. It takes forever. Um, there's a lot of work. Somebody horrible is giving you feedback that's just nitpicky, and
Well, and I think it's more that it's a different kind of writing experience than you've ever had before. And that for me, it was more like it was frustration. So, you know, any other time in your life, you write a paper, you turn it in. I think there were a time or two where a teacher would give it back and you'd have to do a revision like one time. But you never have this back and forth kind of experience until this. Like, it was always, okay, so I got a B, fine. I might not be happy with that because like I said, I'm pretty type A,
but at least it's over, right?
but it's over. I did it. It's done. It's good enough. I passed. And that's not the experience that the dissertation is at all. It's, you're going to keep working on it until it's right. And
And it's
that,
not a small paper. Yeah.
right. And that produces some frustration for sure.
Yeah. Um, so what kept you going? What pulled you back from the ledge, so to speak?
Uh, Family support for sure. And like I said, a lot of it was about what the kids could see as they were getting older and they knew that I was going to school. It's,
Yeah.
the idea of having to explain to them why I didn't finish seemed like something I didn't want to have to do.
So maybe some shame avoidance.
Maybe.
Yeah. I mean, because there's two sides to that statement I think you made, which was I've come too far to not finish.
Mhm.
Well, that can mean I wouldn't like the way I looked at myself if I stopped. Or it can mean something a little bit different, which is more, I'm going to build on what I've built. I'm going to finish.
Mhm.
So,
And it was definitely both.
yeah,
I mean,
both at once, right? Uh,
well, and I had a goal, a very specific goal in mind, and I think that makes a difference too. I think that if I was doing this without a clear idea of what the intention was, it would have been a lot harder to finish.
right. So remind me, or what was the goal?
So my goal is to teach at the university level.
Right.
Um, and this may sound silly, but I'm going to have 4 kids entering college all at the same time. So I have a very clear goal of getting on with a university nearby, and hopefully one that allows, grants tuition for my children if I'm working there. So
No, that's extremely strategic, right?
So
That
I figure, that'll be I know what it takes to get into a tenure position. I know that's a long process. So my goal was to get the degree and slowly work my way towards that so that by the time they're ready for college, I'm at that level of my career. So
right. Um, yeah, so you had a goal. Um, and I think I would suggest that for everybody. Um, I think everybody has a general goal, but it's more of like finish the dissertation, become a doctor. And they don't always know exactly what that will, they don't have that planned out as far as you do, in terms of, and then I'll get a job as faculty somewhere, and maybe your students will go there for free or reduced tuition,
mm-hmm.
and you can earn tenure, promotion, tenure. Um, so I wanted to share your story again, not to shame anybody who needs to stop. And I always understand a student that does need to opt out because um, hitting your head against a brick wall over and over again, when it's a brick wall and your head's not strong enough to to get through it, that's not a smart life decision. And if that's truly the case with you and your dissertation, if it really is a brick wall and there's not a door over there you haven't discovered yet, or there's not a tunnel, or there's not a way to climb over, and
Mm-hmm.
you seem to find a door or a tunnel or something to get through all the obstacles that you faced. But some people are in a different situation. Um, but I think your story is just fascinating because the amount of obstacles and the just and you put it pretty lightly the way you described everything. But for kids, in case anybody doesn't know, um, and I don't have 4 kids or triplets for that matter. That's not easy, right? That's
Right.
triplets especially. I think is very intense, right? I've got a friend with triplets, uh, and it just seemed like a circus. Um, she did very well, and and I'm sure you did too. But
It takes a lot of structure and routine and a lot more advanced planning than having one baby at a time would. So
so tell me, tell us what your dissertation was about.
it was about career success
Okay.
from the perspective of a supervisor.
Okay. Um, so what got you interested in that?
Well, how it all started was working in the high school setting. I saw a lot of kids who were, I felt like, overly stressed about things like uh, standardized test scores and GPAs and things of that nature, uh, to the extent that they felt like if they didn't score high enough, they were going to be a failure in life, period. Like that was the only thing that determined that for them. And saw kids that even, were exhibiting anxiety and depression symptoms over those issues. Um, and it just didn't settle well with me. It's like those of us out in the work world know that that's often not even something that's asked about, better yet, something that is, the end all be all of all things.
Mm-hmm.
So, but I think that schools give that impression, by pushing people to excel, they give the impression that that is all that matters. Um, and it will be the only determining factor to their success. And so I wanted to gather data that would look at that issue and determine what factors are important to long-term success. Is that all there is, or what do supervisors say actually makes a successful employee.
Right. So you talked to how many supervisors
15,
and what field?
various fields.
Various fields. And so you're talking to the supervisors about what they saw in their employees who achieved success or didn't. I think you focused on what are the things that mattered for your employees to be promoted to achieve success. How did you define success?
Well, we discussed both subjective and so promotions, pay increases, things of that nature, but also job satisfaction, whether they are happy in their work and stay in that field long term.
Right. All right. So without getting too far into the details of the study, what did you find?
Well, first off, we did find most of the supervisors said that they don't even ask about things like standardized test scores or GPAs. They assume that you got what you needed to get the degree if you needed a degree, and then that's all they really care about, which I felt was important. I mean, there was a discussion of, likely people who scored that high might have some other traits that were beneficial in the workplace, like they might have drive and dedication to their work or things of that nature. But what they said was more important to them were things like flexibility and adaptability. So being teachable, being able to make the changes that were necessary to adapt to the demands of their job. A positive attitude. Yeah. When they talked about a lot about drive, but it was like wanting to work and wanting to do the job well and wanting to take on things even if it wasn't specifically required of them or right in their job definition. So people who are just willing to do what needs to get done are the most successful people. So it seemed to be a lot more about personality traits than it was about achievement. That, and they did talk a lot about that on-the-job training was a lot more important, because a lot of the fields especially said, someone may come with all of the head knowledge that they learned from a degree that trains them for this position, but what they're actually doing day to day is so specific that the on-the-job training is much more beneficial for their long-term success than the standardized education. They also talked about support from family, support from peers and supervisors, that, being in a supportive working environment made a big difference. As well as the ability to balance work and home life. So that discussion was interesting to me because there was a lot of, it wasn't necessarily whether the person had a good home life or a bad home life. It was the ability to separate their home life from work, or the ability to set those things aside.
Yeah. I'm thinking you must have had to do that a little bit to achieve your dissertation success.
Well, I actually had a really interesting conversation with my supervisor in the job that I was at before I moved here to Oregon, because there was, at the time that I was going through my divorce, there was a teacher on staff that was going through one as well. And she didn't have as much of that balance from what I could see. I didn't know her very well, but my boss sat me down and said, why can't she come and just do her job the way that you do your job? And set those things aside. And I didn't have an answer for that. I don't know, what her situation is, because like I said, I didn't know her very well, but it was clear to my supervisor at least that the work-life balance issue was affecting her performance.
The personal life was bleeding over into the professional life.
Mhm.
Yeah, I think what is that, compartmentalization and just I don't know that people can always control that. I'm sure it's a skill you could work on, but sometimes we're just humans, right? And
Right.
so whatever happened at home is we're going to be thinking about that during the day if it's upsetting enough. And luckily, or maybe I should give you credit for developing the skill, but you had the skill of being able to focus on the work at hand instead of what was happening at home.
Mhm. Well, and I think that kind of goes into some of the other data that was collected during my dissertation process, a discussion of fit of the job to the person, and fit of not just the job responsibilities, but also the environment of the job.
Mhm.
That finding something that fit you well was a strong determinant of your success. Um, and that came up in a discussion about introversion versus extroversion, um,
Hmm.
because there's data out there talking about how extroversion is linked to long-term career success, which my thoughts on that is that very likely that study was done from self-report, and I'm thinking that very likely extroverted people are more likely to volunteer for a study of that nature. Um,
Sure.
but when I was discussing that with the supervisors that I interviewed, they had said it isn't about introversion versus extroversion. It's about whether your level of introversion or extroversion fits with the responsibilities of your job and the environment of your job. So, for example, one of the people that I interviewed was a regional minister. So he was a supervisor over a bunch of other pastors, and he had said, it's not, you know, if you are asked to be like a pulpit minister and you're supposed to be up um,
Hmm.
giving these sermons and you're supposed to be out socializing with all these people, that wouldn't be a good fit for an introverted person. They're going to feel tortured in that job and they're not going to be successful.
Right.
Whereas if you're in a position that is more research and study based,
Mhm.
that's going to be a better fit for that person within the field. Um, and several of them talked about, I talked to people that were in accounting and library sciences and teaching and all different, and it was, well, it just kind of depends on what their job is and whether the the environment of that job is a good fit for that person. And I think it was kind of the same thing when talking about the work-life balance, because several people talked about, well, some work environments are more accepting and understanding of when home things bleed over, and
Mm.
they're able to accommodate it better
Right.
than others. And so for her, wasn't the best fit. The environment wasn't the best fit for her to be able to be the person that she is and experience what she was experiencing in the way that she was.
Right. She may have needed some sort of leave of absence or
Hmm.
something like that, whereas you were able to keep going.
Hmm.
Um, we're all built differently, of course, and
Hmm.
but we have different types of needs.
And I think it's finding the job that fits your needs is really important.
And asking, when you get in those crisis, quote crisis, they're not all crises, but when you get in those situations, asking for what you need and being self-aware enough to realize
Hmm.
what you can and cannot do, and then having a frank conversation with your supervisor and saying, I'm in a bad place,
Hmm.
or
Right.
this is rough at home. I'm keeping an eye on it, uh,
Mhm.
and I think I'm going to be okay at work, like you were. Um, yeah, I just kept picturing Milton from Office Space. Do you remember him, Milton? He got sent down to the basement to work. He kept getting sent. They took his stapler, they sent him down, and I was wondering if Milton was an extrovert, he would be extremely unhappy, um,
Right.
and he would have burnt down the building a lot sooner. Uh, Set the building on fire. Yeah, so I was thinking about the people from Office Space, which are just these characters that we all sort of know from our own workplaces. I think.
Mhm.
Um, that's really interesting. It sounds like they also have to have this buy-in. I kept thinking about buy-in to the company. Like, what makes you do more than is in your job requirement?
Mhm.
Well, some of that's personal drive, need for achievement, but it's also you have to have the values and mission of the actual organization.
Mhm.
You have to care about them as an individual to go beyond
Right.
your job duties strictly and say, I want to do extra because I want this company to succeed or something like that.
Mhm.
So buy-in.
Well, and I think to a certain extent that ties in with a conversation I had with one of the supervisors. He owned a string of liquor stores, and he was talking about when we had the discussion about formalized education. He said for him, it's actually a hindrance if someone comes in with,
Right.
you know, an advanced degree of any sort, because it's hard to have the buy-in for the type of field that he's in
Hmm.
if you have education for anything else, right? Um, so he said often those people don't do well because they're not very motivated to do well.
Interesting. So they probably think of it as a stepping stone or a temporary sort of gig.
Or he gave the impression of even like beneath where they're at
Right.
in their path.
Right. I can see that for sure. That's that's fascinating. So what do we tell? I mean, obviously, and we probably talked about this in your dissertation defense. What, what do we tell? We go beyond. We wouldn't use a 15-person qualitative study to make big conclusions.
Mhm.
But if follow-up studies said this same thing, what would we change? I guess.
Well, I think that it would be some adjustment to the interviewing and hiring processes in a lot of places,
Hmm.
in what they look for and the type of questions that they ask, and just how they're reviewing candidates, right? If we're focusing more on things like flexibility and drive and determination and like buy-in to the company and things of that nature, um, there's got to be a better way to assess that
Hmm.
than the standard way of interviewing that we have used for
Right.
this
They
role.
always ask for GPA. They always ask for all your awards and things like that. So I wonder what would happen if we did the same study with HR. With HR personnel. Uh,
Mhm.
it seems that you're hearing in your study one thing from the leadership, the employers,
Mhm.
but a lot of HR departments. My experience has been they care a lot about all those grades. That's
So maybe there is a disconnect between who HR feels is the most hireable candidate and who actually is the most successful candidate in the position.
Well, I don't know if you've been seeing that commercial. I've been watching a lot of Arkansas baseball because we've been winning, and it's
Mhm.
fun to watch when you're winning. But they've been showing that phone it in commercial for some insurance They should pay me for saying this, but I don't even remember who it is. But it's a commercial where the idea is phone in your claim, and all these people are like doing their jobs and like not really paying attention and painting a window, and the guy opens the window and he gets paint on his face, and they're like,
Oh, yeah.
I just phoned it in, and everybody's saying phone it in. Anyway, the point is, you're welcome, whatever insurance company. Um, Send me money. Um, but it seems like maybe HR is just they're phoning it in. Maybe HR typically, no, I've got HR friends I'm insulting right now. I don't mean it that way, but maybe we're doing just a tradition, that is, and maybe we need to rethink it. Maybe we need to rethink how all that works, and whether we need to emphasize. Maybe there are ways to de-emphasize some things that we're overemphasizing, and emphasize new things.
Well, I especially think when a organization is seeing a high turnover rate, that maybe that's a good clue to them that they need to reassess the way that they're looking at their hiring process.
Right.
Personally, I think, and I think I mentioned this in the dissertation, but I think that having some sort of um, I don't know quite the right word for it, but like a more of like an internship, like you get hired on in a provisional internship kind of basis, and that is your interview, right? That is, let's see how you actually do in this position and if it's a good fit for you. And also, if you feel like it's a good fit, right? I think a lot of times people accept positions and feel like once they've accepted it, they're obligated to be there, right?
And then you got to stay a year or two, or it
Yeah,
looks bad on your resume or CV.
exactly. Exactly. Where you might get there and immediately realize this is not a good fit. I've had that happen to me before. I took a position that I thought was going to be fantastic.
Right.
And I got there and was genuinely miserable.
Yeah.
Um, just and part of it was that the hiring committee had one impression of what I would be doing, and the supervisor had a very different impression of what I would be doing. Um, but I left after 2 weeks.
Right.
And I mean, I had moved to a new town and I broke lease, thankfully, was able to break lease pretty easily and move back and be done with it. But there should be that trial. There should be, a month, 6 weeks, something where that wouldn't count against you,
Mm-hmm.
where you don't have to list that on a resume. It is simply a trial basis
Mm-hmm.
where you're both assessing whether it's a good fit.
The courtship of sorts,
Yes.
dating.
But how are we committing to something that's such a major part of our lives after an hour-long interview?
Yeah, and a lot of it you find out the first day, like, oh, or yeah, like I had a job that said faculty in the job title.
Mm-hmm.
It wasn't a faculty position. I didn't get those 2 years of work as faculty, experience, and so that's why I'm at a different level. I'm currently assistant professor instead of, I'm sure I'd be associate at least, professor, but because their job title and job description
Mm-hmm.
was and they didn't fix it. They were
Right.
just like, oh, well, that's because we're going to use faculty funds to pay for your position. I'm
Mm-hmm.
like, well,
But that's not what you're actually doing.
very unclear.
Yeah.
Very
Well, the position that I had actually taken a children's minister position.
uh-huh.
This was ages ago. Um, and I was really excited about it. And I got there, and the head pastor apparently thought I was going to be her assistant minister, not children's minister.
Oh,
Or at least that's how she intended to use me, and like wanted me to apparently it was a congregation of a lot of elderly, and she frequently had funerals, and she wanted to pass off half of those to me to conduct funerals, which is not something I had any desire to do ever in my life.
Kind of opposite of children.
Yeah.
No, I'm working with the those who are just beginning to gain digits.
Right. So, and her personality, she wasn't even in the interview committee, and her personality was very difficult to handle. And it's like, I figured that out really quickly, but I should have had that exposure before committing to something like that, right? There should have been
Yeah.
the ability to feel out the job and make sure that it is the right fit. So I think at least in career positions, there should be some sort of trial basis where it's not, you're not committing to anything, and it's not an offense on either side if you don't stay. Because I think also there's plenty of times that people hire someone in and then feel like they can't get rid of them, right?
Yeah.
And they're not a good fit, and they don't do well in the position, and they probably knew that pretty quickly.
Yeah. And that's interesting. And we can talk about that. Your next book, your first book? I don't know.
I haven't written a book before, so.
But that sounds really interesting. So let's bring that back up. I wanted to ask you before this interview takes too long. Going back to the dissertation or the doctoral process overall,
Mhm.
what insights do you have to sort of say, well, here are the things after 3 months of being done, here are the things that maybe you have a unique perspective on, or you think here's what people should know, or anything like that?
Mhm. I think for me, a lot of it was about time management and motivation. I had to really work on that. Like I said, juggling kids and full-time work, and getting to a point of just not wanting to also. So for me, I had to break down what I was working on into very specific goals. Like, I'm going to do this section this week, or answer this specific question, instead of looking at chapters, because that seemed overwhelming. And when you get overwhelmed, then you just don't want to start at all, right?
Right.
So I would break things down into very small chunks, um, and list out exactly what I intended to do. And for me, when it came to the push, the motivation part, what really helped me was I played some psychological tricks on myself.
Good.
So I would hire a sitter for an afternoon, even though my family is here and could have supported me and done it. Because if I was paying someone, I felt like I needed to get the most for my money,
Mhm.
and I would work a lot harder and get more done because I was paying someone during that time.
That's smart. I like that. Yeah.
I also bribed myself a lot. Like, I can get this or do this or whatever if I get this section done.
Right. So you set up some operant conditioning for yourself.
Right.
That's good. I like that. I do that all the time.
All the time.
I'm not always strict with myself.
You let yourself do it anyway, even if you didn't accomplish what you're supposed to.
I'm gonna eat the cake anyway, whatever it is. So that's good. So you stayed motivated and you managed your time well. Those are things we hear a lot about, but I'm not sure people break them down very often.
I have a saying that I reminded myself over and over again. It's, how do you eat an elephant? One bite at a time.
Mhm.
So, like, even though the dissertation felt like an elephant and this huge, monumental task to achieve, it was just one bite at a time. Right.
Yeah, I like that a lot. I've heard it before, but it's very fitting for the dissertation. Um, Because if you look at the enormity of what you're about to do or what you're doing, how much you've done and how much you still have left to go, all of it is just overwhelming. And yeah, if you think too far ahead and look at all of it, like, oh, let's take a look at what I've done and how far I have to go, you're going to be like, I, I'm treading water here. I'm getting nowhere. But yeah, and that makes me think I need to work on. Do you remember that Monday.com thing? I think I used that with you at the very beginning. I haven't built it up. If you want to help me, you can. But what that had was mini tasks. MINI tasks for every single step. And I think I need to work on more of that for students too, so that they can chunk it out into tiny accomplishments, and so that they can see those tiny accomplishments being ticked off, check.
And I think for me, what really helped was I would set aside a time to do it at a certain time of the week and then not have it bleed over into the rest of the week. So like I didn't work on dissertation every day.
Right.
I didn't let it be an all the time thing.
You
So
controlled your time schedule.
I determined how many hours I wanted to work per week, and I set a specific, like, okay, I'm going to spend Saturday afternoon getting as much accomplished as I can. This is what I intend to accomplish. And then I'm not going to touch it again until the next time I have scheduled to do it. I think that really helped for it not to feel so overwhelming.
Right. That's good. And that's sort of that goes back to that work-life balance. I think the way I approached it is every free minute I had, I should work on it. And so it bled over into everything. In my mind, whoever I was with, friendships, romantic relationships, whatever, it was always sort of tainted, so to speak, by I was thinking about my mistress, the dissertation, while I was with those people. And I was always torn, maybe not always. I did okay, but I definitely didn't do my best. So what do we take from all this? I see you as somebody that is definitely a sign that you, a symbol of something that it can be done amidst chaos, amidst very difficult circumstances. Learned a lot about sort of like, we had a long conversation about work and sort of maybe even our doctoral students, obviously anybody, but our doctoral students, in thinking about the next job that they have, how can they maybe be more mindful about the fit? It's not all about the money, right?
Right.
That's one thing that I try to remember, and that's one reason I've chosen certain jobs over others. I won't be specific there, but and then to stay motivated, to manage your time, and that kind of goes back to this the book on the 15-minute dissertation, which is put yourself in front of the computer. That's kind of what you did with the babysitter. I think you were like dedicated time to do that. So how does it feel to be a doctor? I want to end with that.
Right now, it doesn't feel a whole lot different because I'm not doing much with it. But when I got the email asking for an interview for an adjunct position, and it was addressed to Dr. Shaw, that felt really good.
Nice. Yeah, it takes a while, and it has to do with, what you're doing. And if you're teaching, of course, you have a whole classroom of people saying, but Dr. Shaw, what about this assignment? But, and they repeat it. But it is an identity that is sort of takes some getting used to. So
I think it's cute right now. I mean, my kids occasionally will say, you're Dr. Shaw, aren't you? And it's adorable because so my dad has his PhD and my brother is a surgeon. So 3 doctors in the family, and they had a hard time understanding because I, of course, I'm not going to go do surgery like their uncle does. So what they have adopted as their understanding of it is that my brother is a doctor of the body, my dad's a doctor of the spirit, and I'm a doctor of the mind and feelings.
right.
So
That's
it's pretty
good.
cute.
How old are they?
The triplets are 5 and the little one's 4.
Yeah, that's pretty good for 5-year-olds and a 4-year-old. That's more than a lot of 40-year-olds understand the different types of doctors. Yeah, so your father is a well, you said I was going to say DDiv, but
he's got a PhD in theology.
PhD in you said a PhD, right? So, all right. Well, your story is one of success, amid struggle. I love those stories. I would have loved it better if everything had been easier for you, but you wouldn't be as proud of it. So I'm really happy for you. I appreciate you sharing your story. Monica is available for anybody listening or watching. Monica Shaw on Facebook. If you message her, she might message you back. If you want to learn more about her research studies or just get in contact with her. I will say, please like, subscribe, share, give us 7 stars or whatever it is, the max, 10, 20 if they allow it. But most of all, I'd like to say thank you for tuning in. Thank you for meeting my student and now my colleague, Dr. Monica Shaw. It has been a pleasure to have you on the show. This has been Driven to Doctorate with Dr. Goodin. Thank you, Monica.
Thank you.